We haven't necessarily made that decision yet, but the forces that are going to bring us to that decision will exist, and we're seeing the impetus, their energy start to come out now, especially in the economic area. When we get to a certain point, 25% or more unemployment, the starting to collapse of the various components of the federal government, things are going to rush along, and then we're going to get into this real strange period from January on that will bring us to, as I say, it's the active phase of the American Revolution, Part 2.
Well, let's talk about what some of those elements will look like when we get into the active phase.
Well, the first thing will be the refuseniks rising again in January, February, even in spite of the huge amount of fear language that will be presented on the swine flu. And they will cause a repression wave to come out. Our data, and I even hate to use the word in any kind of an air form on radio or anything here, because it'll undoubtedly involve me with persons I don't want to discuss things with. But I actually think that Obama won't be an issue much after February. Either he will be critically wounded or killed in one of several assassination attempts.
And we don't advocate that. I want to go on.
No, I'm an anti-violence person, right? And it's stupid to fall into their Hegelian dialectic of being violent against the powers that be. It does not work, people. We have to be smart. And smart in this case is not violent. But the government is going to be extremely violent, or the powers that be. I don't want to say the government, because that casts aspersions on people that are civil servants trying to do their best against horrific conditions.
Yes.
Okay, but the shadow government, or whatever we want to call these nasty bad guys, are going to get very repressive starting in January, February, and we see a purge coming, a purge of what the powers that be are going to call obstructionists. And these guys will just simply be in the way of the iron fist coming out of the velvet glove. And that begins this active phase of the revolution. Now, if we're smart about it, it need not be violent. And it can be a peaceful revolution that will totally change things. The good news is that our data seems to indicate by July 7th of 2010, the tide turns for the ordinary fellow. And at that point, the revolution is spread beyond the U.S., and it's starting to reach around the world. And we start getting some of these critical mass elements starting to pop up. Not to mean that it's over, because the revolutionary period will continue all the way through the rest of 2010 and into most of 2011, and we'll shade into what we call the alien wars as things pick up with this contact meme.
You're opening up a can of worms here for the second time, Cliff. You've got to come back and do a show on the alien wars, because once we go down that road, we're going to leave the callers high and dry here, and the listeners as well.
But I know, and it's fascinating to me because I've grown up on science fiction and so on, but we actually have to not go there. We need to stop and focus on what's going to be facing us here in the first 6 months of 2010.
Cliff, what about the Internet? I mean, we could lose the media, the free speech we already have on mainstream media, but what about the Internet?
It's going to go, it's under attack, so to speak, or not attack per se, but we think that it's going to be shut down in the early part, or the first attempt to shut it down will occur in the early part of 2010. That is to say, before the spring equinox, probably. So that would place it before March 21. It'll be in this huge frothy chaos period when there's all kinds of violence coming out. The government's getting real strange in terms of its the laws and so forth. And so the Internet will be under some assault. However, it appears as though it won't take, so to speak, that the very reason and manner in which the Internet was designed will allow very inventive people to create, if you will, a black market or a gray market version of the Internet on the same wiring that we have now.
Hey,
I don't want to go into more details.
Manny's my producer. Annie, you got to keep us on the air. You heard it's possible.
All right.
Well, basically, look at this. One of the things I was discussing with some other techies today is that one of their first methods that the powers that be will use to shut the Internet down doesn't involve any of the phone systems at all. What it involves is the DNS servers, and they'll go to the top level of the DNS servers and zero everything out.
Yeah.
So the Internet will disappear because you won't be able to type in the name half-past human. You would have to know the IP address of our server in order to be able to get that page and have to navigate differently. The server will still be up and it'll still be available, but because the DNS servers will go away, millions of people won't be able to use the Internet. Make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Paul, thanks for the call. Let's go to JG from California on line 4. Hi, do you have a question or comment for Cliff?
Yeah, hi, Dave. Hi, Annie. Cliff, I got a I got a major question at the end, but the other two questions or subcategory or lead down towards the direction of my main question. So you don't expect the dollar to fall till about a year?
No, I expect the process of the dollar falling to take a year. It's going to take some huge hits. On the basket of currencies, we might see it go from whatever it is now in the mid-70s, and it might drop down to 60, and it might do that over the course of a month. But it'll take a whole year for it to get to the point where you and I are probably not dealing in dollars anymore.
So you and I will still be using the Fed notes up until that time?
No, it's going to be. It's not going to be ubiquitous. We may not even have a nation state as we understand it in November of 2010. The revolutionary period that we're going to get into here will affect everything. The level of transformation is going to be truly shocking. So you may find that if you live on an island up here in the Puget Sound, that particular island forms its own currency. And so you're not using that currency, and it might occur in January or February. But maybe in certain regions of California or Colorado or some other place, you might use the current Federal Reserve notes, only everybody takes big indelible ink and writes, Free Republic of wherever on them. So we'll be using stuff, and we're going to have to come up with different ideas and go through a whole lot of experimentation. It's not like there's going to be a substitute currency thrown in for the dollar as the dollar dies. We're going to have to invent these kind of things because the government isn't coming around to save us. Nobody's out there to help us.
Yeah, they're not our third parent, as so many people mistakenly.
Right. Yeah, and even if they were, do you really want them intruding?
No, exactly. JG, do you have a quick follow-up?
Yeah, what I'm concerned about, that those of us that are out of work sort of right now and been for a while due to whatever reason, somebody has offered me a position on a major radio network, and I'm not real versed in, literally have not that much experience on it. I mean, do we really have any possibility of a future at all between now and 2010 of November to even consider holding a job or anything like that?
Sure.
I mean,
you've got to take every opportunity that comes your way that you can physically get at. In my viewpoint, you need to pay attention to opportunity because that's universe talking to you. Now, maybe the universe wants you to move. It could do it by offering you a job that gets you moved. And okay, so the job goes in 2 months, but you're in a much better place. That kind of thing. Make sense?
But I don't know this person very well. How can I trust him?
That's an issue you got to deal with. I mean, you got to do your due diligence. You can't be an idiot. You got to check out what they're offering and, say no long enough until the universe provides you with the opportunity you need.
Exactly. And time is not fixed and mutable. And, JG, we got to move along because we're going to be right up against the break. Cliff, before we get into the break here, I want you to let everyone know how they can get a copy of the WebBot and a little bit about your website. So
sure. Well, we have the reports for sale on our site at halfpasthuman.com. The last 2 reports have been put out at $10 each, and we're going to bring the one out in September, sometime between the 15th and the 20th, dealing with the new data, and it'll also be $10. And there's a couple of older reports out there for sale as well that get into some serious numbers of pages. The reports we're producing now are about 40 to 50 pages long, rather dense and very dire because the nature of our work has a tendency to concentrate on the negative emotions just because they're easier to pick up.
Well, it is negative, and we're going to finish that thought on how people get in contact with your work, get more exposure to it, after we come back for our final segment. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back with Cliff. Welcome back to the final segment of the Common Sense Show. We've been joined tonight by Cliff from the WebBot and Annie DeRiso. And, guys, I just got informed by my producer, Manny Quiros, off the air, that we've been beamed with some high-pitched signals, and we actually lost me for a second there. And, Cliff, if I stepped on your toes there by saying hello over you, that's why. It's not on any of our end, and maybe someone doesn't want this message out, but this message is coming out no matter what. We're not stopping. Cliff, before we go back to the subject of your website, I had a listener contact me off the air, and they desperately want me to ask for a short answer to this question, and they want to know if there's going to be any national exemptions from immunization.
I don't see that. I see them attempting to make forced vaccinations, and it will fail. And it will fail simply on logistics, and it's more of a fear campaign and a fear tactic, and it will actually shock the powers that be. So I'm not particularly worried about it, the idea of forced vaccinations, and thus the need for any kind of legal exemption is kind of spurious. You're playing into their particular fear mindset. Just say no, old Nancy Reagan thing.
Just say no. I totally agree.
And then see what they do. They can't lock us all up. And if I'm one of the first that they do come and get, y'all can find me in the corner of that camp, and I'll be the guy with the spoon digging the hole.
Yeah, we've had that discussion in my house as well, and Annie and I've had that discussion several times. Clif, I guess one of the things that I really want to know is what can people do, short answer, to prepare for what's coming? How can we best survive individually what's coming?
You need to get yourself focused on your own immediate needs and not get trapped by the constant blaring from all of the media. Be attracted to this, be concerned about that. You have to watch the level of fear language that you allow to penetrate your consciousness, because that's what gets you the deer in the headlights fixation. And if you're just focused, and you can actually make progress during this time. I mean, it's weird to say, but, it's crisis. But, of course, if you look at it in a particular way, there's also opportunity in crisis.
Exactly. Yeah.
Opportunity to change everything, including but we got to start as individuals.
Well, it's going to take some pain to throw off the shackles we've allowed to be thrown onto us.
Yes, and a lot of people don't like suffering, but that's something we have to admit. And that's why I go into the martial arts and I let all these young kids beat the absolute, well, we won't go into that, but they flip me around and I suffer. And it's like, yes, I'm aware of suffering on a weekly basis, and it keeps me focused on what we're going to have to go through. Very horrific times, I kid you not. I'm laughing about it, but we will have famine in the U.S. We're going to have global famine. Our estimate is maybe 1 billion people will die over the next 3 or 4 years. This is not 1 billion, at least a billion. We've actually got numbers going to 1 billion and a quarter. And that's the good scenario.
Wow. Yeah, that is, because if the dark side gets their way, it'll be more like
higher.
about 6 billion.
Yeah.
halfpasthuman.com.
But only if you've got the intestinal fortitude. I don't want people to buy these reports and then go into some kind of depressive shock. That's not what they're there for. And
they're
you got to know yourself first.
Yeah, let me clarify this. These reports are to inform so one can logically prepare.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Clif, as things unfold here into late September and October, we need to get you back on the air again for an update.
That makes sense. Let's put it off until after the next report comes out, because I'm going to just be hip deep into it for some time here. So after
what will that time frame be?
Probably after the 20th, but maybe we might get it out as early as the 15th if we can put a big
September?
rush on it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's kind of what I had in mind. I was thinking more along the lines early in October.
Sure,
because by then we'll have a real trend curve, won't we?
Yeah, we should really be able to see a lot of this stuff by the end of September.
Well, Clif, we're up against the end of the show as usual. You've been a great interview, a great guest. I'm sure our ratings will be off the charts again. Thanks so much for joining us. The time just disappears, Why isn't your show 4 or 5 hours long? It should be.
Sorry about that.
Stay tuned, everybody. Next week we'll be back with Catherine Albrecht, who will be our guest from RFID Chips. Thanks to Annie. Thanks to Clif. Thanks to Manny and to John Statmiller. Join us next week. Have a great week. God bless, everybody.